I've tracked sandrakes across the Cinder Reach for 11 years, and I can tell you the one thing every manual gets wrong. The beast isn't the dangerous part. People are. A drake wants meat and warmth and to be left alone in its burrow. People want to look good in front of each other, and that's what gets the rest of us killed. The Reach doesn't forgive mistakes, and it doesn't announce them either. You learn to read the ground instead. Drag marks, scat, the particular silence that settles over a stretch of glass right before something big decides to move through it. 11 years of that teaches a man to trust what he sees over what anyone tells him, which is probably why I never made much of a courtier and never wanted to. I was 3 days into a bounty run, lying flat on a ridge of fused glass with a spotting scope, when I saw the column come apart below me. It was a royal procession, or what was left of dignity trying to pass for one out here at the edge of the Reach. 6 armored outriders, a covered transport, and a woman standing in the open bed of it like she thought the drake circling their dust trail was a weather pattern instead of a hunting animal. I found out later she was the Queen of Illirath. At the time, she was just the fool who hadn't been told to get down. The drake hit the lead outrider first. Sandrakes don't roar. They come up quiet, through the ground, and the first sound you get is bone. The other 5 riders did what 5 armed men do when they've never actually had to earn their pay. They ran. Not toward her. Away from her. I watched the transport's driver cut the harness lines and bolt on foot, leaving her alone in the wreck of the cart with a shattered leg and a beast that had already decided the whole column was its afternoon. I want to tell you I thought hard about it. I didn't. I was already moving before I finished deciding, which is usually how the good and the stupid choices both start. I put 2 rounds into the drake's flank to pull its attention off her, which worked exactly as well as you'd expect, meaning it worked, and then it came for me instead. And I spent the next 4 minutes learning that 11 years of tracking these things teaches you where to hit them, not how to survive being wrong about the angle. It took the ridge in 2 bounds, low and fast, throwing glass in sheets, and I put my back against the cracked outcrop and made myself small and patient, which is the only trick that's ever worked on something that size. I got it in the eye ridge on the 3rd pass, close enough that I felt the heat come off its hide before it dropped. It went down into the glass in a heap that cracked like a dropped plate. And then the Reach was just wind and the sound of her breathing hard 15 feet away, staring at me like I'd fallen out of the sky. She had a bone showing through her calf and sand ground into a gash along her jaw, and she still tried to stand up like the whole thing was a formality she needed to get through before she could be embarrassed properly. I told her to sit back down before she made my morning worse than it already was. She sat down. I think that surprised her more than the drake had. I didn't ask her name. Didn't ask what a royal transport was doing running an unescorted line through Drake country, or why her own guard corps had legs faster than their spines. None of that was my business, and none of it was going to set her leg. I cut a splint from the transport's snapped axle rail, packed the wound with what clean cloth I had, and when she started shaking, not from pain I don't think, but from the particular kind of cold that comes after you've watched everyone you trusted decide you weren't worth dying for, I gave her my coat, and then I turned my back and sat facing the ridge instead of her, watching for a second drake, giving her the 2 minutes she needed to put herself back together without an audience. "You don't want to know who I am," she said eventually, to my back. "I want to know if that leg's going to hold your weight tomorrow," I said. "The rest is yours to keep." We stayed like that until the light went orange, me watching the horizon, her working through whatever it is a person works through when the people sworn to die for her instead ran a full click before they remembered to look ashamed. I built a fire out of drake bone marrow, which burns hot and slow if you know how to strip it, and I gave her the dry side of it and took the wind side myself. And somewhere around midnight she finally told me her name was Cassandra, and that she governed something called the Illirath Wastes, which explained the transport but not much else, and I told her mine was Rye, and that was the whole conversation. Neither of us pushed past it. I liked that about her immediately, though I wouldn't have said so. She asked me once, staring into the fire, why I'd moved before I'd finished deciding. I told her the truth, that I hadn't been thinking about her at all in that first second, only about the fact that 6 armed men had left one unarmed one to die in the open, and that the arithmetic of that had never once sat right with me, going back further than I could easily explain. She didn't answer right away, she just nodded, slowly, the way people do when you've said something they've been waiting a long time to hear someone say out loud. Later, when the fire had burned down to coals, she asked whether I thought her guard would have come back for her eventually, on their own, given time. I told her I didn't know, and that I thought she already knew the answer better than I did, and that some questions aren't really questions. They're just a person getting used to a fact before they have to act on it in front of other people. Her retinue found us 2 mornings later, a fresh column, faster, better armed, Sent out once someone finally noticed the Queen hadn't checked in. The captain who led them was one of the 6 who'd run. I recognized his boots before I recognized his face. He'd left drag marks getting away from the wreck that I'd read off the ground on my way in. He came up the ridge already talking, already building the story where the escort had regrouped tactically and returned at first opportunity, already reaching for her arm to help her up like his hand hadn't been part of what put her on the ground in the first place. She didn't take it. "This is Rye Tolvin," she said, loud enough to carry to every rider still filing up behind the captain. "He is the only person in the Cinder Reach who did not run from me. Everyone else in this column outranks him. No one else in this column will speak before he does, starting now, and that includes you, Dessen." The captain's mouth opened and nothing came out of it, which I understand, because nothing I'd have said in his position would have helped either. She turned to me next, and I want to be honest. I expected a coin purse, or a medal, or one of those long formal speeches rulers give when what they actually mean is thank you and goodbye. What I got instead was her sitting back down on the transport's tailgate next to me, in front of all of them, and saying quietly, like it was just between the 2 of us even though half the Reach could hear it, "I'm not offering you a reward. A reward is for people I don't intend to see again. I'm offering you a posting at Elirath, permanent, your choice of duty, and my word that if you ever run from anything in your life, which I doubt, I will still remember that you didn't run from me." I told her I wasn't much for court life. She said that was fine. Elirath had a border, and borders needed people who didn't panic, and she'd rather have one of me on it than the 6 who'd left her leg in the sand. Then she asked, for the first time since the Drake, whether I still had her coat. I did. I'd been carrying it folded over my pack for 2 days without noticing I hadn't given it back. I gave it to her there on the tailgate, and she put it back on despite the heat, and neither of us said anything else about it, because we didn't need to. Some things you understand from the way a person hands you something back and looks at you a half-second longer than the handoff requires. I took the border posting. I never did learn to speak first at court, and she never once made me.